Why does China think they get to own Taiwan? Well, anyone can think anything, but this isn't just anyone. This is China, the world's second biggest country with the world's second biggest population, and everything that their government thinks is based on the opinions and attitudes of hundreds of millions of their citizens. And so, in this video, I will be investigating and detailing the three main reasons that the Chinese government provides as to why they should own Taiwan. I will be ordering them from the ones I find least compelling to the ones I find most convincing. First is the historical argument, the second is the cultural argument, and the third is the legal/political argument. Now, even though I'm weighing these up from least to most convincing, obviously I am not endorsing or supporting any of these ideas. These are all the opinions and statements of the Chinese government. Now, the historical argument basically details that because Taiwan used to be part of China, it should be part of China now. China details that there have been archaeological discoveries showing the presence of the Song dynasty as far back as 964, and also that Taiwan was a Qing prefecture of the Qing dynasty up until the early 20th century. That's all well and good, and everyone agrees that Taiwan was part of China, but it doesn't really do much to aid China's claim, because in general, history is a pretty poor claim to territorial sovereignty. I think if you spend enough time on the internet, you get used to this type of thinking, talking to 13-year-old Serbian ultra-nationalists and whatever, but in general, for actual real-world politics, it doesn't make much logical sense, since if we're supposed to zoom in on a specific snapshot in history, then what point do we pick? The Chinese might say it's 964 when they owned Taiwan, but the Japanese might say it's 1942 when they owned half of China. So it's impossible to weigh up and pick which historical claim is stronger, because at one point Greece owned Afghanistan, and there's no reason for that to translate into actual policy and dividing up the modern world. So for that reason, I think the historical argument is the least valid, but the cultural argument is much more convincing. Now, this argument from the Chinese government goes that because 97% of Taiwan is Chinese speaking and 95% of Taiwan is Han Chinese ethnicity, Taiwan should be part of China. However, the main counter-argument to this is that there are many countries in the world which have united demographics but have independent claims to sovereignty. For example, Germany and Switzerland, or Germany and Austria, which all have very similar German ethno-linguistic background, but all have distinct political histories to where they're independent countries today. And however, this argument from the Chinese does do a good job of combating the Green Coalition, which is the ruling party in Taiwan's main arguments, which is that the indigenous peoples of Taiwan have shaped Taiwan so significantly that it's now a distinct nation and thus cannot be part of China. This claim is quite absurd because the indigenous people make up about 3% of the Taiwanese population and have had basically no perceivable impact on modern Taiwanese governments or Taiwanese national history. And so, in that respect, the Chinese government does do a good job of refuting that argument of the Taiwanese. However, just because they have the same culture, like I said, isn't enough on its own for them to claim that they should take over the country, since, well, we all know how that went with Germany. And so, for that reason, I've put it as the middling argument for why they should own Taiwan on this list. Now, the third argument is the legal/political argument, and it's, in my opinion, the most compelling because it gets to the crux, if you will, of the China-Taiwan divide, which is, do you think that political division is enough basis for one country to secede from another? Now, in the UN's eyes, the answer is no, and in the eyes of China, the answer is no. The UN doesn't recognize the right for countries that disagree to be separated. Like, for example, the UN wouldn't recognize the Donetsk and Lugansk People's Republics seceding from Ukraine just because the eastern half of Ukraine has different voting patterns than the rest of Ukraine. And in the same light, that's why they don't recognize the existence of Taiwan. They actually explicitly forbid the legal existence of Taiwan per UN Resolution 2758, which the Chinese cite repeatedly. There's a lot of people who think the other way, especially the Taiwanese, or, for example, the Kurdish, or there's millions, hundreds of millions of people in the world who think that the Chinese and the UN are just basically wrong in this assumption that they should be, not able to secede on that basis. And so, for that reason, I think it's a valid argument if you're to assume that the UN and China are correct in that claim. However, on the other side, I think there's also a claim in the other direction. Now, I think ordering these claims from least to most believable, in my opinion, gives the illusion that I support any of them, when I do not. I do not support the claims of the Chinese government. I am giving these for the sake of information and education. Now, if anyone would like to hear about the Chinese government's perspective further, then I will link the resources that I used to do the research and also the pamphlet which the Chinese government made most of these arguments in. It was released at the Chinese embassy in 2022. And so if you would like to hear anything from the Chinese further, then you can hear it straight from the source.